Any particular favorite authors?
Margarita Reynolds and C.S. Lewis.
Cool. Good, good. How about you?
I also like writing novel-type pieces and songwriting and poetry.
That's the whole range, songwriting and poetry combined. That's great, great. And mostly fiction writing?
Mostly.
Yeah, okay. Who else wants to share? How about a Rio Americano?
Brenna? I'm interested in law and international relations, so I interned for a judge over the summer, so I've been working on law-related writing.
Oh, wow, good. In Superior Court?
Yeah, I interned for Judge Earl, who's at the Superior Court of Sacramento.
Excellent. Awesome. I know we're going to wait just another couple minutes, make sure we have everybody. I just saw someone else land. Looks like a teacher or a senior in high school.
Yes, how do you do, Mr. Torlakson?
I'm Tom.
How do you do? I'm Michael Mahoney from Rio Americano High School.
Oh, good, good. Are you the coordinator for Civitas? And
No, that's Linda Reed.
Linda Reed, okay.
I,
But your students have already been outspoken.
yeah,
That's good.
I stand on her shoulders.
Okay.
If anything's good in my classes, it's her.
I think I did a pretty good job for you.
Any others wish to share other things you like writing about? Come on in and have a seat. Alexi's a reporter from the Sacramento Bee. He's a journalist. Paul Hefner. There's lots of good writing. We were just sharing a little bit of everybody's background for those who just write. All journalists, and some interested in writing science, well, fiction, and others interested in poetry and song. Very good, very good. So, check the clock. We want to start promptly on time. Are we in good shape? Now, this being a press conference, I can role play with you right here, and then at some point we can, I move around a little bit too, so, but we'll start it like this, as if it were a regular press conference. And Bill is my good assistant. I'll just introduce myself and let us get going. I'm Tom Torlakson, State Superintendent of Public Instruction, and very delighted to see you all here and learn of your interest in journalism and covering the activities of your school, community, and the broader world. So glad to be here and take your questions. Go right away into what you'd like to talk about.
Who's up first? Go for
Sure.
it. Go for it, Laura.
Go for it. Please, if you could, each of you, when you propose to ask your question, if you could just tell me your name and the school you're with.
My name is Bethany Johnson.
Great.
Students see inequality in school lunches. Why is it that some schools have more variety than others and are also allowed to go off campus?
Okay, that is a local decision made by some of the school board leaders in the 1,100 school districts in the state of California. And really, that's an issue of local control where I believe it's important for students to express their feelings about the lunch, both its content, nutrition, and its taste and presentability. That's really important. I visited a couple years back. I was over at Folsom High School. They developed a very excellent program, and they got a lot of student input. They did student surveys and so forth to get an idea of what students wanted on the menu and whether it was attractive, whether it was presented well or not. The area where it's not local control is if money is misspent. So my department does a lot of auditing of programs to make sure the money's spent where it's supposed to be spent. And so we found out through a whistleblower to begin with in Los Angeles, they misspent $100 million of money for the food. And that shortage of dollars would have led to a deterioration of the school meals, in my opinion, less fresh fruits and vegetables and less attractive presentation. So my auditors went in and my attorneys went in and I met with high levels in the Los Angeles district and we negotiated a settlement where they're paying all that money back. But it does take more for fresh fruits and vegetables. We're working with growers, with people in the food industry, farm to fork, to get fresh fruits and vegetables into our schools at more affordable prices and rates. So again, it's a local control issue, and we'd be glad. We have a nutrition division in my department that provides food for 4.5 million meals a day. And so we'd be glad to work with students who wish to understand how they could have a clearer voice, a more effective voice in what's presented as your food. What's next? Hi.
I'm Melissa Furtado from Eleanor Hickey, and my question is, bullying is a serious issue and a lot of kids commit suicide every day. What role do you think schools should play in preventing this?
They need to provide a very, very strong role. And safety is key. That's a top priority. So I've helped write laws to prevent bullying and discrimination. We need to make sure those laws are enforced, and there's training for the teachers and for the students to recognize the signs of bullying and to take action to stop it. My niece committed suicide, a very tragic moment in my life, and she, didn't fit in and had a lot of issues that led to her taking her own life, and that's the worst kind of tragedy you can imagine. Yes? You Americano.
Yeah, I'm Brenna. So since the genesis of the high school exit exam, it has been revised and simplified significantly. You've recently stated your support for eliminating the exam or transitioning to a more difficult test aligned with the Common Core standards. Why do you think it's the time to make that change, and what is your plan for dealing with the possibly lower passage rates and transitioning between the tests?
Well, thank you. Assessment and testing is very important. The exit exam was set up as sort of a minimum standard for students to demonstrate their academic skills to move on to get a high school diploma. It is time, since that legislation is many years old and we now have other ways of doing assessments, it is time to update. I want to check with some of you out there, actually. Did you take the computer adaptive test under Smarter Balance last year? Did any of you take that?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a new computer adaptive test. When a lot of the old tests were developed, we didn't have tests that you could do online that could tell more information about your skills and capacity in different areas. So I think it's time to re-examine the exit exam and upgrade it. Whether it's part of Smarter Balance is a question. Could it be part of the set of questions and problems that you tackle as part of the larger Smarter Balance testing in language arts and in math? So the exact answer to that question is in progress. We have a committee of experts working to look at how to transition into the new form of assessment in general, and then how particularly should the exit exam be handled going forward. I want to ask, again, an opinion. We can have a little dialogue on these things. How many of you think there's just the right amount of testing? How many of you think there's too little testing? How many of you think there's too much testing? Any of you seniors here? Taking many tests?
Very many.
Very many. Any opinions? Any of you want to share your opinions on that question?
Is the STAR test gone for good now?
Gone for good.
Okay, because we were the last class to have that. I was wondering.
Yeah. In fact, just a little story about that. Those standards of the STAR test were sunset several years ago by the State Board of Education, the legislature. But the U.S. Department of Education asked us to test our students last year again on the old tests that were aligned to the old standards. And I said, not another minute, not another dime should we waste on double testing. Let's give more students a chance to try the new computer adaptive test, which only would have been given to about 700,000 students. Instead, we expanded it to everybody eligible, which is about 3.2 million. So we had a showdown with the U.S. Department of Education because they said, if you don't do our double testing, do the old tests, STAR and CSTs, and the new test, we're going to take away millions of dollars of your Title I money for helping schools with high poverty student bodies. So at any rate, we had a showdown, and I stood my ground and I said, no, we're going to do what's best for students, and having students take an old test that's sort of senseless and won't measure up to what we need, let's give students a chance to experience it. 3.2 million students did experience taking the test for the first time last year. So there's a little example of, I don't believe it's right for Washington, D.C. to sort of top-down pressure and tell states, and tell school districts what to do. that should be more a local decision-making process. Yes. Who's next? Yes?
Hi, John Stabry, Americano. Should test scores be part of teacher evaluation as they are in much of the country?
I think test scores, along with student work, portfolio of student work, classroom visits, feedback from students and parents should all be part of an evaluation system. Again, though, sort of on the theme that top-down doesn't make so much sense, as each district hammering out what its evaluation system should be, and who should be at the table to help define the mix of values and the mix of evidence that should be used to judge a teacher and their work. And so I do believe that teachers and parents and administration need to sit down at the local table and make progress in figuring out the answer to that question. Did I answer it entirely? Okay, good. Who's next?
Don't be shy, just speak up.
Yes. Oh, and then we'll go to the front row if you would. Thank you.
I'm Ariana Simpson from Illinois. Teachers aren't as interactive in classrooms as they were before. What shifts have you seen in your teaching approaches during your career?
Shifts in the format of a classroom? Is that what your question gets to? Or how learning's delivered, I guess you could say? Well, what I like is the trend that we're now moving towards. Again, we got rid of the past, these old tired out tests and old standards that had a lot of rote memorization, a lot of bubble testing, a lot of multiple choice. And now we're into this new era of 21st century skills, critical thinking, problem solving, working with other students in a team, having good writing skills and good speaking skills to communicate well with your team members and the rest of the class, bringing evidence to bear behind your arguments, behind your hypotheses. So I think this is a much smarter way to go about learning, and it's what our employers and our colleges want to see. They want to see you, when you graduate, have a set of skills, we call them 21st century skills, that you will be thinkers, and you will be able to problem solve, and you'll also understand the value of getting the wrong answer. There may be 5 answers, and 2 of them are wrong, and 3 of them are right, in pathways to get to the end result. So I think it's a much more creative way to go. And instead of the teacher being the sage on the stage and just the fountain of all wisdom coming from the teacher out to 35 students, well, in 35 students in a class at large, some students are below where the teacher's talking the lesson of math or language arts. They're sort of lost and frustrated. Some are advanced, 2 or 3 grades above where the lesson plan is, and they're bored. And so one of the changes is having individualized plans for each student's success and knowing where that student is at and where they need help. And teachers can do this through their own observations, but they're greatly aided by computer systems with software that sort of get you to the level you're at and make you feel comfortable and confident to go ahead and tackle those, not to drop out, not to get just turned off, not to be bored, but to work right in the zone where your capacities can be stretched and expanded. So I think this is a positive trend. One last thing I'll mention is blended learning. So some of you have experienced this, perhaps in a class of 35, 10 may be working on computers right at the level of their academic capacity. 10 will be working, 10 or 12 will be working in groups as a team, solving a problem, working together to solve a problem. And the other 10 will be working with the teacher, so more direct contact with the teacher who has a data printout of how the student's doing in these different areas and has a nice dialogue and more one-to-one with the students. So I think that blended approach is good. Any of you been in blended classroom environments where they break it up into, and then rotate every half hour? You might rotate through, and the students doing the teamwork would meet with the teacher, the students working with the teacher would go to the computers. You've had that experience? What do you think of it?
I thought it was weird because I didn't know really what was going on. It was interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's good feedback. Any other feedback on that?
It was weird at the time, but then I can see where we're coming from. I just thought it was weird because we have lower classes in the same individual room, so it's a lot of kids. I was like, why are we going down to basic math and lower things than where we are now? So it's I was confused at first, but I got hang of it because we have the mix in. It's like, oh, it's not all about the others who was able to go on, because some people may still need help on it.
Well, that's a good, many of these transitions are gradual, and, you know, having it explained well and having it experienced well is really important. But I think it's a new day, and when you have crowded classrooms, and we saw this a lot during the recession, with tens of thousands of teachers being laid off and class sizes going from 30 to 39. Students, again, some would be lost and frustrated because the lesson was so far above their level, and you may have transferred from another school or whatever, but this way all students can be more engaged. I like that.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that?
Yes?
So I heard you talking about how important critical thinking was and the value of getting wrong answers and learning from those. And it kind of struck me that journalism classes are one of those classes that can really instill that. So I would ask about, I guess, the cuts, again, to journalism and classes like that can affect students and teach them that value of the wrong answers and put the students on the stage versus the teachers being on that stage that you've mentioned.
Great, thank you. And whether it's science classes, civics classes, or journalism, those are a local decision, but student voice should be heard in that decision. So those decisions are made by the school board, the site administration. I want to share some good news. Along with this push that I've led as superintendent over the 10,000 schools and 1,100 school districts, I've been really pushing for more local control and decision-making, but couple that with more resources. So districts were struggling, and we still in California struggle because we're, 49th in the nation of what we spend on our students. And states that spend more have higher academic results. But I share with you, just to give you an example, I've visited McClatchy High a few times. Sac City Unified School District is getting $47 million more on an ongoing basis. So there is more money that the local school board has in its hands to make decisions that could respond. Do you need more counselors? Do you need more librarians? Do you need more journalism classes and opportunities? In science classes, do you need more equipment, lab equipment? Do you need more field trips? That decision will be made by the majority of the school board with input. I'll give another example. Rio Americana, of course, you represent. San Juan District is getting $34 million more on an ongoing basis. So this is the big reform that I worked with the governor on, worked with the state board and the legislature. It's called the local control funding formula. And it's coupled with an accountability formula. So the accountability says you should have a transparent budget process where students and parents and teachers can all participate and understand the decisions that are being made and have their voice heard in that process. So advocates, whether it's for better school meals, for Civitas times 10, whether it's your interest in journalism, this is where students can organize and your voice can be part of shaping those local priorities. There's more resources to help reach those goals. I think you had your hand up a while back.
Laura Jones, River City High School. It has been shown in schools that have switched to Common Core that students are experiencing more stress from school than before. How do you think Common Core will affect students in the future?
Thank you. And I would ask if you could share, after a brief comment, what your source of that research is. There is a lot going on. We're just getting started. The new standards have been there, and teachers are getting the professional development. I've fought for legislation to give more money to the schools for professional development so the teachers are up to speed on how best to convey this new style of learning. And in fact, I got $1.25 billion that has now been invested in that professional development and helping get more computers. So I think the Common Core, where I've visited classes and talked to teachers, where they've had good preparation, I find that students are engaged, they like it, it's a little different, it's more challenging, they like working with the computers. And so I'd be curious as to where that, maybe change in itself is something that does create some stress, but I haven't heard it as a widespread problem. I think we're all going to need to be patient and work forward together and systematically to implement it. But once again, I see students doing hands-on and really enjoying it. Students in Arcata 25 students get money from the last year's class, buy a piece of land, CAD computer-aided drawing, they design a house, they lay the water lines, the sewer lines, the electrical lines, the digital lines, and they spend 3 or 4 hours in the morning on their normal academics. In the afternoon, they go build a house, and then they sell it, and the next year's students get the proceeds to start over again. But it's hands-on, and I think students, when I was a teacher, teaching high school ecology, biology, physiology, health, students really liked hands-on, I thought. And I think there's probably some stress in the transition, but it's a good thing, and I think we'll get used to it as we go forward. Did you care to share any of the citations or place where? Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yes?
Although Lowell County inner city schools may receive more grants, there is a difference in the facilities, equipment, and potential career activities between high schools and wealthy areas opposed to those in low-income areas. What do you plan to do to make more equality in funding and programs?
Thank you for that question. I've had a track record of doing just that. In fact, after-school programs, I'm the author of legislation that led to 4,000 after-school programs in California. We targeted the students of greatest need, and in that regard, those students are safe after school, they're not just exposed to drugs and gangs, and they get enriched, academics. They finish their lessons of the day, but they also, have science, they have art, music, and drama. The new local controlled funding formula is an historic, gigantic, huge, awesome shift to invest more money in kids of greatest need, with students from communities of poverty, with English learners, with foster kids who may be disadvantaged from so many different reasons. So this is a shift of billions of dollars, which I mentioned for the district I mentioned a few minutes ago. It means major new investment. For Sac City, it's $47 million a year ongoing. I've also been the architect of several school bonds, and in those school bonds, they were $9 billion each. We went to the voters 4 times. We got voter approval, $36 billion. We targeted schools of greatest need. So schools that have been neglected for whatever reason, if the local school board hadn't paid attention, if certain schools on one side of the tracks got the funding, but schools on the other side didn't, the school bond measure targeted more money to help the low-income school districts. And what I do personally is I help promote local bond measures so that we are sure that the students in those neighborhoods with greatest needs, schools with the greatest needs, with leaky roofs, peeling paint, that those schools get the attention they deserve. Finally, I did a program called Quality Education Investment Act. It was $3 billion invested in about 500 schools over the last 6.5 years. And we've seen, it was targeting the lowest performing schools. We've seen massive turnaround from being at the very bottom to moving up towards the very top rankings. And that's in hundreds of schools in that program. So I'm very committed to that. When I first went into teaching, I chose specifically to teach in a low-income, what we call Title I community, because I knew those students had the greatest needs, and I felt as a young teacher I could offer, young teacher coach, I could offer more to those students to help them realize their dreams and get a stronghold, get a good foothold in their education academics.
Will Bowden, Northford Davis Senior High School. So can you talk about your stance on teacher tenure and its role in the employment of teachers?
Sure, I'd like to share that. I think it's a good question, and it's an area that's somewhat misunderstood.
Yeah.
And so first I'll say that I'm appealing with the governor and the State Board of Education a ruling that was made by a court that nullified some statutes. And I think it's going, Kamala Harris will bring it to a higher court of appeal to look at. I do know that there are tools today which administrators can use to not give someone more permanent status unless they're up to it, and to get out of the classroom teachers who aren't up to speed. I know as a classroom teacher that it's a tough job. Not everyone's cut out for it. And those teachers who are struggling and can't improve, those teachers who are not effective need to be moved out. In fact, this year I helped get a law signed into effect. The governor signed this about 4 or 5 months ago to make it easier and faster and streamlined to fire ineffective and incompetent teachers, as well as abusive teachers. And so those are some things that I think are important. I also believe that part of the set of laws that we're at debate is about the right of due process. I do believe that experienced teachers deserve a fair hearing when their job is on the line. And that's, again, part of this whole debate. And finally, I'll just say, I think there's too much blame game going on, too much focusing on where are all these really bad teachers, and not looking at where we should be looking, which is investing, as I said, investing in the future, in smaller class sizes, in stronger academics, in bringing art, music, and drama back, in career education. That's my position on it. Who's next? Not everybody's asked a question.
I noticed the poster about the state's pending on education and in lobby. If monies to the prisons was redirected, how might schools use it to reduce prison populations?
The question is how, when we invest in education in schools, can we reduce?
Because there's more prisons than there's schools, or I mean, more money in prisons than there's schools.
Well, thank you for the question. I'll say there's too much money going into prisons when we know we can save lives early by investing in education. Education spending is about half the state budget, and I think prison spending is about maybe a fourth of the state budget. But nonetheless, the main point is that there's what some people call it a pipeline to prison. If students continually reach barriers, hit barriers, and can't move on, if they can't read proficiently by third grade, they're disadvantaged. If they come to kindergarten with only one half the vocabulary of other students from more wealthy backgrounds and homes that have a literacy tradition where the parents read and the students read with them, they're at a disadvantage, and they're highly likely to drop out to drugs, gangs, jail, juvenile system. So investing in education is the best cure for that, in my opinion. We also need to look at reaching and teaching the whole child. So there's other support services. Maybe the mother in the home is addicted. Maybe the dad is abusive. Maybe one of them just got out of prison or is going to prison. So there's some additional supports needed for those students to help them stabilize their lives, get the helping hand they need, and move forward to success. And that's again why I'm happy to see that our graduation rates are going up, and we're going to concentrate even more on making sure that that happens. We are also working with the Attorney General, Kamala Harris, to deal with the truancy and chronic absenteeism issues. My department, me personally as superintendent, has set this as a very high priority, making sure students get to school safely, and can concentrate. But 80% graduation rates is a record all-time high for California. And the career academies is another place where I see students so excited about their learning. No matter how low they may start, they'll work hard to do their homework, not to skip class, not to skip their homework, because they see a job at the end of the line. And the graduation rate there is more like 95%. And so that's what I would say is agreeing with you that we need to invest in education and supportive services to a family, and then that'll reduce the prison population and the growth in the prison costs.
Yeah, because these kids are our future. Well, us, we're the future, and they've made their decisions to be from prison. And some of them are not even getting out, and there's still more time. I mean, more money on them.
It's tough, and I, as again a teacher, and I was also an elected county official overseeing juvenile hall and the boys ranch. I used to go out and run with the students who were labeled juvenile delinquents. I call them not students at risk, I call them students of promise, and work with them to get self-confidence, to get on the right track. And when they're released from juvenile hall, or the boys ranch in this particular case, what are the support services we're giving those students so that they can succeed and not fall back into the neighborhood gang or the neighborhood negative activities, but sustain. Finally, after-school programs, whether it's sports, drama, music, art, another really important way to engage students, get them excited about school, getting a sense of their inner strengths and talents, so that they will take the right track and not hit the prison. Yes?
Hi.
Rio Americana?
Yeah, Paige from Rio Americana. You mentioned that there needed to be programs in place to catch students early before they start falling behind. One such program I know of personally is the Reading Partners program. Do you know anything about that?
I don't, but from the title, maybe something I'm familiar with.